Hey, I don't wanna be inside today. Need to find my escape. It's time for shutter nonsense now. Yeah, it's time for shutter nonsense now. It's time for shutter nonsense now.
I'm like drawing a blanket. How to be natural.
Act natural, Michael. Act natural.
Hey, Jeffrey, how you doing?
Yeah, I'm doing good.
As we laugh about
Is that our intro?
Camera.
Act
That's
natural,
all right.
Michael. Act natural.
Yes, I'll just leave that in for
Don't be a
for
dork.
giggles. Well, I wasn't going that path, but thanks, I guess. Anyways, now you've made me totally forget what I'm doing here. So anyways, welcome to episode 19 of Shutter Nonsense. We're starting off completely on brand. For this one, again, that's going to be follow-up to the last episode. Ironically enough, was episode 18. Funny how that happens, where we talked about the benefits of shooting locally and revisiting the same locations. This one, we wanted to branch, as we said in that previous episode, into what comes along, both pros and cons of travel for photography and why we might feel spurred to travel for photography and some of the benefits that can come along with it. Easy for me to say. Before we get into that, before we get into our little updates of what we've been working on, though, I just want to do a quick plug for the podcast. If we could get you all to go out to your favorite podcast platform of choice and leave us a review, it would be greatly appreciated. We've gotten a chunk of them, but most of them came within the first month, 2 months. So it'd be nice to get some more reviews out there to give other people that might stumble across us a little bit of an idea of what we're all about, and hopefully that you guys are enjoying it. And for
5-star
them to check
reviews.
it out as well.
We should be
5-star,
clear. Leave us
preferably.
5-star reviews.
We want you to be honest, but if you got crap to talk about us, maybe reach out to us individually or through our email on the website, and we can have a chat there about the constructive criticism. But no, want honest reviews. Hopefully they're 5-star. Written comments definitely help as well to give people an idea of what to expect and everything like that. But like I said, we've kind of stagnated on the review front, so that'd be great to see. And then, of course, as always, join us over on Patreon to join us in the post-episode discussions. Fun little community there. You can be part of the conversation, whether you're a free member or a paid member. And, of course, we would certainly appreciate the financial support to help fund this little gig that we've been doing called Shutter Nonsense. So I think that covers all of my shameless shilling and asking for money and reviews and all that stuff. So, Jeffrey, what have you been up to this past week? I feel like we've talked a bit, but we haven't talked a ton. Like, we had that call on Wednesday, but
we did.
I don't really know what you've been up to.
So last weekend was the art fair. I participate in the shared booth with the local photography club, and that went well. I actually had a pretty good show. It's a shared booth, so I think that impacts a little bit of what kind of comes through there, because the booth is not so... it's not a unifying look because you got different people hanging different stuff, and it's shared with a few others. But I was pretty happy with the show. I went with a little different route than I normally do. This year I had larger metals up, which I've done metals before, but I went even larger this year. I did 20 by 30s in the booth for my little section. And then I did a lot of matted prints to go with it as well. So, and the matted prints, of course, is what sold. I have my calendars there. Those sold as well. But the strategy of luring people in with the large metal prints, and then they start looking at the more affordable items that suddenly seem inexpensive compared to the metal prints, strategy seemed to work pretty well. So
cool.
So that
Sounds
was good.
like your calendars did a little better than last year, and that you switched back to the local thing.
Yep. Calendars did well at the booth, and then I've also I finally put them up online on Sunday, I think, and so I've had a few sales through there online as well too. So cool. So the calendars are going good. The art fair booth went pretty well. So that puts me back into workshop mode. Again, the podcast timeline throws everything way off.
Right.
But for me, in today's present time, getting ready for my West Virginia workshop, which is in a week and a half, something like that.
For full disclosure, we're recording this on September 26th.
Yes.
So again,
it's way
podcast timeline.
Yes. But so workshop prep to get ready for that trip, and a little bit of travel after that as well.
Good deal.
So
well, speaking of workshop prep, so I alluded to the call we had Wednesday. So
yes,
we're in the midst again, it being end of September. And when y'all are listening to this, it's going to be, January. How in the world? But anyways, we better have our 2026 workshop offerings out there. So I think I alluded to it last episode before, but we're looking at expanding the number of workshops we're buddying up on, and we're putting our heads together and all that. So kind of figuring out what we want what this looks like, both short term and long term. But anyways, if you like us, join us on a workshop. That'd be fantastic.
Yep.
Let's see what I've been up to. Again, no photo editing. I thought I was going to get on here this morning and say, Jeffrey, I've got great news. I did photo editing. Instead, I've been working on the mobile app that I've been plugging away on. And again, hopefully by the time anybody's listening to this, it's been out for at least a couple months, but working on a packing and kind of checklist app specifically for photographers. Started sharing it with a few individuals privately to get some feedback and kick the tires, see if there's any bugs. And the response has been really positive so far. So fingers crossed that once I do get this out on the app stores, that it's well received and goes well from there. Again, the big hurdle, like I'm feeling confident about the design and functionality and everything. I feel like I'm like 95% of the way there. It's mostly just design stuff now. But then I got to start looking into, okay, I got to pay for the developer access with Apple and Google. Then I got to figure out all that and do the final testing and their test environments and everything. So that's the part I'm leery of, how to do it all. I know I've got step-by-step instructions to the platform I'm using, but never done anything like this. And then also getting into that final testing and then submitting it. And I understand there's an approval process and all of that. I'm hoping it'll go fairly smooth. Like the whole intent of the bones of this app is that it'll work completely offline, completely on device. You don't have to log in. You don't have to provide any information or anything like that. It's intended to be centered around privacy and functionality. So I'm hoping, I don't know, but I'm hoping that'll make it a little bit easier for the App Store approval process. I don't even know if Google has an approval process. They kind of seem like anything goes sometimes, but
yeah.
So anyways, I've been doing a ton of work on that, and that's been the bulk of my time. The other big thing that I've been working on, and astute viewers on YouTube might notice that my setup looks a little bit differently. My camera looks a little different, maybe field of view is a little different. I've been in the process, I think I'm mostly done now, but I bought a MacBook Pro M4 Max earlier this year to use on the go to replace my 7-8-year-old Microsoft Surface Book. And it's been great, but then I was finding myself jumping back and forth between a Windows desktop and the MacBook when I'm on the go, and I didn't have everything on one or the other, so it was kind of like, well, I got to do this stuff on the laptop, this stuff on the desktop. So for the first time in my life, I am attempting to go only Apple, only Mac. Still have some frustrations with Mac OS from time to time, but I think for the most part, I've either found settings to tweak or it's just been a matter of getting used to it. There's been a couple little applications I've downloaded, like a really nice little screenshot app that solves the gripes I had with the native one. So
I should get that one.
Yeah,
That's
I was going to tell you,
it's
called Shotter. It's really nice. You can do annotations directly in
Shotter?
there. Shotter, Shotter.
You
You can download it for free, and then after 30 days, it'll start bugging you for payment,
money.
where you can just pay them up front. But yeah, it's really slick. The biggest thing
That's
I had,
cool.
like the Windows screenshot thing, like you snip part of your screen and you can immediately annotate it right there. Apple, if you just want to copy it to the paste or to the clipboard, you couldn't do that. So Shotter's got that. It's got all kinds of stuff. You can put backgrounds around it and do full screen screenshots, scrolling screenshots and everything. So yeah, that's been really nice. There's something else I downloaded that kind of fixed some minor beefs I've had. But anyways, long story short, per the usual with me telling a story, it's going well. I had to spend a good chunk of money to get a hub, a Thunderbolt 5 hub, so I can work with my 2 external monitors. I've got a nice little desk stand that I can just slot the laptop into vertically to keep the desk nice and tidy. So I think you can kind of see I've still got the desktop tucked off on the side here with wires sticking out, because I'm sure there's going to be stuff that I realize I didn't download on the Mac or whatever. If this works, which it seems to be working, I'll be able to edit photos on the laptop, which I haven't really done in years and years, because I've always just had the external drives of my raw files connected to the desktop all the time. So looking forward to that. And we'll see how this works out. But I think it'll be tolerable. It better be, considering I spent over $300 for the hub. I spent way too much money on the Apple Magic Keyboard with Touch ID because I wanted that. Yep. And then, and the reason I look different is because, for whatever reason, I've been using my DJI Pocket 3 as my camera. with the desktop. But for whatever reason, as Jeffrey found out when we started doing this
Yes.
podcast, is the Mac OS system does not seem to like using the Pocket 3 as a
Does
webcam.
not. You always thought I was doing something wrong, but it was really just, it's really truly that Mac
I assumed
Pocket
it was
3
Mac,
interaction.
and at the time I was still, that cocky Windows guy. So of course it had to be the Mac problem, but I do think it's a Mac problem. Well, it's a Mac issue, but probably DJI's fault. I would assume, since other webcams
There's definitely
work
something
fine,
with
so.
the interaction there, that's for sure.
Yeah.
Because it works
So I
flawlessly
followed,
for you on Windows, but
Yeah, I never had an issue. Not a single issue. But anyway, so I followed Jeffrey's lead, and I've got an Insta360 Link 2 webcam right now, which is pretty slick. Again, not the
Yeah, I'm
cheapest, but
real happy
it's
with mine.
slick. And quality seems to be really good, which is what I want, because I'll use this for recording tutorials and all that kind of stuff too. So anyways, that's mostly what I've been up to, is app development and getting my desktop, my literal desktop, resituated for using the MacBook as my main hub. So I'm trying to think, like, photography wise, I didn't edit any photos. I did get a podcast episode finished, so yay.
Scheduled
But yeah,
as well.
it's been another weird, wonderful week of managing a photography business and doing nothing like directly related to photography. So anyways, let's talk about travel.
Yes. Let's talk
Unless
about
you have
travel.
something else you want to talk about. But I
No,
think we've
travel's
covered all our
good.
bases there.
Travel is good.
So I know, again, kind of like we prefaced last episode with, like, hey, you may think this isn't going to be of interest, but I think actually we've got some really good talking points to cover here in terms of more how this could play into the creative and psychological, philosophical side of things. So give us a chance if you think oh my God, I'm looking back where my Pocket 3 was. I'm not looking at the new camera. I'm going to have to get used to that. I'm looking down at the left corner. But anyways, if you think you know everything there is to get out of traveling and photography, give us a listen anyways. We're fun, right? We're Shutter Nonsense. We're always going to entertain you. So
Always
anyways,
good
so
time.
there's the obvious things of travel versus staying local, and time and money and the ability to do so frequently versus infrequently. We could go into the whole, the environmental impact of travel and that. I don't necessarily want to get into that. I want to keep it centered around more of the actual active photography and what we can get out of the travel side of things. So I'll just throw it to you first, Jeffrey, is, what ultimately, I know this is kind of a rhetorical question. I live in North Texas. You live in Ohio, not exactly hotspots of landscape photography.
Right.
But regardless of where you might live, what would motivate you to get out and travel, whether it be from just a seeing the world or creativity, more centered aspect? What's your reasoning behind it?
For the most part, it's just the freshness of things, right? Different landscapes, different environments. Like you said, you and I aren't necessarily in the hotbeds of landscape photography, but like we talked last week on the local, yes, there's things to do. You can photograph and work locally, but there is certainly something to be said for traveling for your photography, because it just gives you that fresh thing, that thing you've never seen before. And it can be anything as simple as it's a different waterfall than you've seen before. It's not one of your old regulars. To, traveling more extensively within the United States and seeing, I get to hang out in the Appalachian Mountains a lot, right? Which are a completely different type of mountains than the Rocky Mountains, which have a completely different look. So just total different. And then me, I'm a big fan of the Desert Southwest. And that's just such a radically different environment that you can't help but go to those places and feel a certain energy that comes with it. So I think that's my motivation to go see new places and explore new places with the camera. Is there is undeniably a sense of energy when you go to some place that's different than your normal.
Right. So. Yeah, and I would say that's the biggest thing for me too. Like, as much as I love my local park, again, we talked in our cases specifically, like, we don't have a whole lot of options for shooting locally. So for people in our position, especially, I like going to the local park. Don't get me wrong. It's a beautiful park. I can find some solace and some peace there, unless it's the weekends. But it's a relatively small park too. And like, what I shoot within that park is even smaller. Like, total, I probably, from a photography standpoint, there's like 20 to 30 acres that are reliably fruitful from a photography standpoint. So at some point, you're not exactly waking up in the morning like, ready to go, at 5 a.m.
Right.
Let's get to the park. Whereas going out somewhere new or different or someplace you don't get to frequent as often, it helps kind of re-energize you and get you excited about things. And to your point too, is you can get into such different environments, especially the beauty of us living in the United States is there is such a varied geography and look and feel and flora and fauna just around the country. And especially as you go west, you get into so many different things too. It's hard not to get excited about going somewhere new, but it's also an opportunity to challenge yourself and embrace new things that maybe you haven't been photographing to date. And like using you as an example, Jeffrey, like you're going to Hocking Hills all the time and shooting waterfalls and, so on and so forth. I'm going to the local park and shooting woodlands. Well, when I go to the American Southwest, specifically the areas I like to romp around in Utah, there's not a woodland environment in terms of what I have here. There's tracts of aspen trees and tracts of pine forest and that, but especially where I shoot primarily, it's very much that scattered, really scrubby Southwest vegetation. And then you've got the big cottonwood trees that you might have a small copse of or whatever, but it's a totally different tree environment for somebody like me that really gets into the woodland photography, the tree photography. So it forces me to change up my creative approach and how I'm seeing things and so on and so forth. So it's an opportunity. Like I could have easily gone to Southern Utah for the first time and looked upon I'm trying to remember now. Nathan St. Andre told me how to pronounce it. Paria River. I think it's Paria River, not Pariah. Forgive me, Nathan, and anybody else listening. But anyway, getting into that river valley and going, oh, this is really arid, and this is not at all what I'm used to. And instead, it was an opportunity for me to embrace it and see things a little bit differently, learn to see something that's totally new and different, and unique to me. And as most of us know, I've totally fallen in love with that environment. So yeah, there's definitely plenty of reasons to seek it out. And like I said, it can definitely be a challenge. Like for me, another example of a challenge would be going to Yosemite, my one and only time in 2020. I've talked about basically that entire week is bluebird skies. And you go to Yosemite with these kind of like built up hopes. I'm not going to say expectations, but hopes of, the really moody, misty, low clouds and the Yosemite Valley, the view, the classic view, right? Clearing storm from Tunnel View by Ansel Adams or what have you. And that didn't pan out. So I was definitely challenged in that environment in a good way that, hey, the quote unquote classical conditions didn't pan out. So now what do? I've got to pivot. I've got to learn to see the environment a little bit differently than maybe what I was anticipating. So on and so forth. So from your standpoint, Jeffrey, in terms of travel, like, do you have a type of location that energizes you more than others, or are you really just kind of going with the flow and you just want to see different environments, or do you seek a specific kind of type out?
So it's probably a little bit of both. I think, there's travel that's easier for me. So like going into the Appalachians, either,
Sure.
Smoky Mountains or West Virginia. And there is certainly a set of energy that comes with that. But, the little rolling hills turn into mountains and things like that. But as far as where the real energy is, for me, it's sort of the desert Southwest or more of a mountain, like a west of the Mississippi type mountain, Rocky Mountain type environment, just because it is so radically different. Right. The Rocky Mountains is just they're taller, they're more severe, they're steeper. Elevation. I enjoy the challenges that come from some of those environmental conditions that I don't get here. Whereas a lot of my travel east of the Mississippi, I'm not really, the elevation's not really a factor per se. Right. And the scenes are similar. So if you want to, like, if I could have my will and way, like desert Southwest trips or Rocky Mountain trips would be my energy sources, my energy zones. I just love the desert environment. I find the desert heat, what's the right word? Sort of purifying. And then just, again, the energy that comes from the cliffs, the harsh environment. I enjoy that environment, and that's where I can really feel like a difference in energy. I get energy boosts in my more regional travels, but those West American Southwest trips are the pinnacle of my energy for the most part.
Yeah, again, I would say the same thing.
Because you and I both sort of like that deserty.
Yeah, I mean, I'm split. Like if I had my druthers, and somebody said you get to go on a 2-week trip anywhere you want to go, I would probably choose Ireland above anything else. Actually, I would say Ireland or the United Kingdom. I've shot in Ireland, but really I've only had one trip there. Well, not really. I've literally had one trip there where I took my proper camera kit. Again, for those that don't remember or are new to me, in 2015, I did a business trip over there, and all I had at the time was a phone with a camera, and that's what spurred me to buy my first camera. And
it was a Windows phone, right?
It was a Windows phone. Thank you for bringing that up, Jeffrey.
Of course.
But anyway, so
it's funny. That's the one fact I really like in your deep, dark past. It's like that Windows phone just sticks with me.
Not a dark past. It was a bright, hopeful past that
you're on happier times now, Mac OS. And
I know how the world has changed. But anyways, Ireland obviously has a special calling to me. It's just that and again, it's so different from what I'm used to here, and not just from a woodland standpoint and waterfalls and forest streams and things that I've photographed, but I'd love to get back to more of the coast of Ireland and do more photography around there. That's where I really found a huge appeal, is when I did a tour up to Northern Ireland and along the coast in 2015. And I was going to go back there in 2019 when I had my full kit with me, but weather didn't work out. So, it's not just like, I'm a woodland photographer, so I want to go over there for the woodland, but kind of like the Southwest or the Rocky Mountains, there's just such a varied landscape that's so totally different from what anything is in Texas. I go anywhere where there's like a 300-foot tall hill and I get excited because, elevation.
Right.
But, I'm talking like totally varied environment from what I'm used to. So of course there's that natural like excitement and inspiration and new curiosity and things like that. I've talked about Yosemite and its impact on me. And that's where I went into that trip specifically with that new mindset of not having all these built up expectations and then getting shut down if things didn't work out as I hoped. So that was a very influential trip for me. And I think it was the first time where I'd gone on a trip like that too, where I was able to go into it with that open mind, open eyes, open heart, however you want to frame it, and just accept what came my way, as opposed to going somewhere and saying, okay, well, I got to have, rainbows and dramatic clouds or, sunrises, sunsets, whatever. Right. So it was an opportunity to kind of go into something with a little bit different approach as well. Cause I'll be honest, shooting here locally, I think we talked about it last week, unless there's something special going on, like we have one of those rare Texas foggy mornings or whatever. There's a lot of mornings. And again, I think I alluded to this or outright said it. There's a lot of mornings where I wake up and, maybe I was thinking the night before I'd go to the local park, and then you look outside and it's like, I'm going to stay at home. Well, if I've just traveled across the country or spent money to fly somewhere and, lodging and everything, there's a lot more motivation to get up no matter what the conditions are and quote unquote, get your money's worth. So I think that's a huge benefit of the travel aspect too, is it forces your hand a little bit in terms of not just being able to roll over and go back to sleep. So
it breaks your routine a bit too, right? Like when you're at home, there's always, like you said, you get up and you're not completely into the weather or whatever. Mm-hmm. But then there's just the routines. You tend to, when you're local, a lot of times it tends to be I'm going to sneak out for a quick hour or two and do something and come back. Whereas when you've traveled, like you said, you've invested in that trip cost, the lodging, all of that. So you're able to almost dedicate more time to while you're out there to the photography element to do. So it disrupts the routine of things and lets you focus even more, immerse yourself into it, I think.
Right. Again, get your money's worth out of it, or your time's worth.
For sure. Yes.
So from your perspective, have you ever gone to a new location that you haven't been to before? And do you feel like it helps you see more clearly or more intentionally than when you're shooting locally at a place you're familiar with?
Yeah, I think it's just that whole freshness thing just keeps you more creative. So like when as much as you and I advocate for the photographing locally, there's challenges to it, right? I mean, you've outlined it. You've got 20, 30 acres that probably you're working with. And if you get to that point, but with the travel, to me, it's I feel like it enhances my creativity. I feel like I'm more flexible. In some ways, I feel like my expectations are maybe less just because everything's so new and fresh that it's almost like a kid in candy store approach. So I feel like that's where the travel helps me. If anything, I feel like I'm more creative when I travel, which is weird because you'd think if you worked locally, you would force yourself to be more creative to find different scenes. But for me, it's that energy around it is where the travel comes. So I feel like there's very few locations I've traveled to and been like, can't write. It's like
Right.
I'm even when the weather's not great or cooperating from you got the blue skies like you alluded to earlier. I feel like the travel puts me in a spot where I'm more flexible and open to find something because it's just so much new and fresh.
Right. Yeah, and I think for me, it also, I'm more, I don't want to say willing, I'm more in tune with knowing that I need to be maybe a little more inquisitive, a little bit more curious, and really embrace my surroundings in terms of intentionally actively looking around me, because this is all new to me. I can't just go to that same spot in the local park that I scouted out 2 weeks ago and go back and visit it. And, I'm familiar with it.
Good point.
Whatever. I've got I'm always exploring the local park. I've got those same 5-6 locations in there that I always go and check and, what's it look like now? Has anything changed, et cetera, et cetera. Whereas going to someplace new, and I'll even lump Utah into that. I went there, 5 times in the span of 18 months, 24 months, something like that. So I was going there frequently. And of course I revisited locations, but I'm also expanding my horizons and going to places I haven't been or different times a year. So I know, backing up a step, I don't practice photo celibacy. I think we've kind of talked about this briefly with Sarah, but when I'm going into a new location, my pre-trip planning and research is more centered around general regions to go, as opposed to here's the specific overlooks to go to or what have you. So I'm not going in with a predefined set of photos in mind. So that forces me to be more of that observer and constantly looking around, but also slowing down a little bit. Because I'll get on the main trail in the local park and I'm heads down, heading to, a certain meadow or whatever. And I'm just tuning out everything around me. So I've hiked this, countless times, but I could very well be hiking by something that is different that I haven't seen before, that I'm at a different time and the light hits it differently, whatever. So again, when I'm afar in the field and it's my first time, I'm being, again, more intentional, more observant, because I don't want to miss something and I don't know what's around me. So I'm probably working in a slower pace and taking the time to stop and ponder and look around me. And again, let curiosity really be my guide as opposed to having a definitive goal in place.
I think that's a good call out. I think that's good. I could totally see that you're being more intentional. Because it's when you're local, it's so easy to go, I'll come back later. Whereas when you're out, you've traveled somewhere, you're maybe working the scene a little more with that creativity. I think that's a good call out.
Right. For me, it can be summed up in, I wonder what's around that bend. I wonder what's behind me. I wonder what's over there. What's the view if I climb that hill or whatever.
Yep.
Whereas I don't necessarily, I know my local park really, really well. So it's not like, I wonder what's over there. I kind of know, but again, things do change, but you just kind of start tuning it out and you maybe lose a little bit of that, again, curiosity or I wonder approach.
Yeah.
That I think if you're going into a new unfamiliar location, in my opinion, that's the best approach you could take. So otherwise you're going to be locked into what others have done before you, or you're going to be maybe working at a pace that's not letting you really get truly immersed in your new and different environment and gain an appreciation for it and then start seeing the opportunities with it as well.
Yeah. So one of the things with traveling, of course, I've both touched on, you get to see new and unique environments, whether it be the type of light you get, the geology, or the environment. You might go from a desert environment to a heavy wooded environment, or from wooded environments to a desert environment, or anything in between. How do you feel like those types of changes can impact your overall photography or overall approach as a nature photographer?
First, I'm going to call you out for asking me this question because we just had an off-camera discussion about you wanted to talk about this.
But I
you
reversed
literally
it.
say, I'm going to put you on the spot. So thanks. No, I mean, I think we haven't touched on that, but certainly when you go into new environments and you're forced to, again, be more curious, have more of that I wonder viewpoint, and seek out new and different compositions, scenes, whatever, that certainly plays a role then when you are back home in terms of, oh, I remember how I composed this and maybe it was a completely different environment, but now I'm starting to see those subtle little vignettes of maybe similarities now that I'm back home. Yep. And now I know, oh, well, I'm seeing it. And now I know that I can work with it. Whereas before, maybe locally, I was just walking right by it because it just didn't fit in with the broader woodland theme of my local park or what have you. Yep. So, I mean, I certainly think there's that. And then there's the technical skill aspect too. Like I didn't really do any focus stacking until I went to Utah for the first time. And I got in some narrow slot canyons and things like that, where depth of field was really a challenge. So there was an opportunity for me to do a lot of practice with focus stacking, which then I had to bring home and learn how to do it from a post-processing standpoint, et cetera, et cetera. So there's all kinds of, whether it's those soft, creative, compositional or vision skills, or just technical skills that maybe, again, you're in a different environment and you're forced to do something you haven't done technically before. That all just serves to help you grow as a photographer, and that's going to impact you positively when you are back home. What are your, since this was your question, what are your thoughts on it?
You'll have to include some of the behind the scenes conversation of how we got to this question.
It was basically Jeffrey saying, I'm going to throw Michael under the bus.
Well,
I'm going to talk about this, but I'm going to ask Michael.
Yeah, that's essentially what it was. I knew I wanted to talk about it, but I wasn't sure I could articulate it in a meaningful way. But sort of what I was thinking of, very similar to you, like think me going to Desert Southwest, lots of opportunity to photograph rocks and things like that. I found myself out there doing patterns of rocks on the ground, little pockets where, maybe these pebbles were sitting in some rock outcropping thing, which I probably, because there's so many opportunities to photograph that out there, right? There's all sorts of little rocks and rock debris and little things sitting around that, like, there's not as many trees, so you start to see those things and start to practice them. But in reality, when you come back to Ohio even, I'm around, Hocking Hills has lots of cliffs, but they're overshadowed by the waterfalls and the hemlock trees and all of that. But in reality, there are small little individual, they're certainly not pervasive, there are little pockets of it here and there. But because I sort of got to immerse myself in it in the Desert Southwest scene where there's all sorts of easy pickings, the eye starts to refine a bit. So when I bring back, oh, hey, this is cool. And even though it's just one little small spot in this huge forest, I think it's similar with my woodlands. If I that's an area, even when you and I were in the Smokies, that I feel I have a lot of growth to do well. But if I go to an area that's lot of heavy wooded area, and that's what I sort of need to practice, or it's a feature rich environment for woodlands, it sort of lowers the hurdle to help me start to paint that, because there's a lot of again easy pickings. And that way when I go to a more an environment that's a little harder to piece together from a woodlands wise, I sort of was able to practice in an area that was easier and then grow my skills to find those compositions in more difficult, chaotic areas. So I think travel can be helpful for that, to see things, because you're able to immerse yourself in them in one environment, but then sort of bring those skills back, whether it be compositional or technical, like you were talking, learning the focus stack, doing the focus stacking. So now you have another tool in your toolbox when you get back to your local or regional area.
Right. Yep. Totally agree.
And
so
whoever thought to keep that question in there was,
man, what a jerk. That making me talk about it first. I had to pull that one out of my rear end. Oh, wait, that's what I do 99% of this. I black out and then come back to when I finish talking.
What did I say?
This next topic I've got flagged on our little prep sheet here can lead into many things. I'm thinking of specifically around maybe conservation aspects and that, but do you find that as you visit a place, where it's the first time, or maybe you start going to a new place and you go back a few times, do you find yourself building that deeper connection to it just beyond photography even, or are you kind of more just centered on the photography and don't worry about the rest of it so much?
It definitely goes
That's a
beyond
loaded
the
slash
photography, I
leading
think.
question.
Yes. Do you really just care about your photos and nothing else?
Right, yeah.
What kind of
Burn it all down.
Jeffrey?
Nobody else gets to see
Right?
it.
No, I definitely think that travel builds a connection to environments well beyond just the going out to take pretty pictures aspect of it. Anytime I think you spend time in any environment, you learn a little more about the local nuances and things. So I care probably more about the desert Southwest than I would if I'd never traveled west of the Mississippi. Even regionally, West Virginia, the area I go to, they're facing several. West Virginia's had a history of mining and that conflict of generating revenue, but the impact on the environment that happens from it. And nowadays they're moving towards road infrastructure getting set to impact areas to data centers coming in. And those are areas that if I had never really left the state of Ohio, I probably wouldn't even care about unless it was not my backyard type situation. But because I've traveled to those areas, I tend to at least check news clippings here or there, things like that. And areas I lead workshops, I join the local Facebook groups, so I know what's going on, what restaurants are still in business, what's new and up and coming, new stores, new any of that. So I think that travel, just by nature of put the camera aside, anytime you spend time in an area, there's a chance for greater connection. With that area, both the people that are living there, how they make their living, how the environment impacts them, as well as just from a true nature conservation standpoint of protecting the area so other people can go out and visit it. So I think travel's super important to that. And before I turn over to you, I think that's where our photography can really come in to help show that to people that might not be able to travel, to get them to hopefully care. I think it's harder to do through pictures because people see pretty pictures and don't necessarily connect. But it is an opportunity, I think, for photographers to share those areas and maybe get people to connect, or at least have a chance of that. So, So how about you? Are you in it just for the photos?
Yeah, again, just burn it all down after I'm done. No, I look at it, a simple analogy would be, if something happens to a stranger 1,000 miles away, either you're not going to know about it, or you just be like, well, that sucks, but I didn't know him, so whatever. But if that's your friend 1,000 miles away and they're harmed or otherwise injured or killed or whatever, like, you're going to really have a vested interest in that. It's the same thing for me with those environments I visit to. And for better or for worse, we've had examples of that in this past year with, the big beautiful bill and the initial proposal to be selling off all this private land. And, even 5 years ago, I might've been like, it's just desert in Utah. So like, what's the big deal? But now I've been to some of these places that they were talking about putting up for private sale. And it's like, oh my God, these are some of the most unique, beautiful locations. As Eric Bennett would espouse, like, it's also the silence that is so rare to find in the world. It's one of my favorite things about the American Southwest and the places I've been in Utah is I can stand there and it's just the sound of wind, if even that. Yeah, and there's no planes, there's nobody around, there's no traffic. It's just silence and the natural world. And the more you open things up, of course, the more you're going to lose that, in addition to the environment and the landscape itself is at risk. So I certainly absolutely believe that, of course, you're going to have that deeper connection with some place you've been. It's the same like selling a print. People are going to buy a print of a place they've been as opposed to buying a print of some place they're not familiar with, because they've got that personal connection to it. Again, friend versus stranger. The piece of it I challenge myself on, and I think I talked about this in my interview with Grant Swinburne on his podcast, is, from a conservation standpoint, I bring it up here and there in captions when I post on social media, or maybe in my Featured Frame series that I write over on Patreon each week. But I know I could do more in terms of advocating for these places through my photography, or if it's a topical thing in the country or the world, and I've got photos from there, sharing the photos and like, hey, this is what's at risk. This is the beauty that's at risk. This is why it's important to me, why it's special to me, why it has value to us in its natural state, et cetera, et cetera. I readily admit I don't do as much of that as I'd like. And part of it, as I said again, I think it was to Grant, is I don't know how to bring a unique voice to that. And you look back at Ansel Adams as a photographer, of course, he had a huge impact on conservation and protection of national parks and natural beauty. But at that point in time, it was very much one person extremely well known for that type of landscape photography becoming an advocate for it. Whereas now it's, hundreds of thousands or millions of photographers, and they've all got their their varied viewpoints, or they're all saying the same thing. And then people just start tuning it out because it's just information overload or repetition fatigue, whatever. So how do you find a unique way to do it? And that's a whole other conversation. That's probably another podcast episode.
Right. But, yeah, for sure.
That might be a good one to try to get Eric on. But, it all goes back to, of course, going to a location once or multiple times that's new to you. Of course, you're going to have that stronger, deeper connection to it, care more about it in the long run in terms of what's going on with it and threats to it and so on and so forth. So totally twisting things around here in terms of benefits or values or intent. I've done travel solo. I've done a lot of solo travel. I've also done travel with a friend or on workshops or what have you. For you, when you're traveling, do you have a preference in terms of going somewhere solo or with others? I see you grinning.
I mean, I tend, I hope none of my family's listening to this right now. I tend solo. I like solo. I mean, my history a long time ago is I quit a job and traveled for about 4 months out west and living out of the car during that time. And that was all solo. I mean, you'd meet some people along the way, here or there, made a few friends, from different places. But I would lean towards solo in a lot of cases, especially for especially if I'm going out to do photography. Solo tends to be, and you know how it is. We get out there, we'll stand in a spot for hours, or in this particular region waiting for something or scouting it or doing something. And there's not a lot of patience if it's non-photographer folks. So my preference probably leans towards solo. With that said, groups can be fun. I did a meetup off of the Landscape Photography Worldwide Discord. Did a meetup once out in Death Valley a couple years ago, and that was fun. But I think it definitely takes going into. I purposely did not plan any sort of where I want to be, what I've got to see type thing, because I was like, I'm just want to be flexible and go where people go. I happen to know people on that trip knew way more about the area than I did. So I figured, who am I to say, let's go here versus there? It's going to be way easier and more relaxed to just go. And that was great. It was fun to hang out and talk with other photographer friends from that. So I will do group, but if we're going to say which way, if I'm really going to immerse myself and it's really for the point of my photography, I'm probably going to want at least some solo time to do some things myself without sounding too isolated from people. But how about you?
Well, it's a split, right? Like there's a huge difference between going with family or your spouse or whatever versus going with other photographers. Yep. And, using Heather as my example, she loves nature, but she loves looking at nature or looking at nature from a nice deck or, she's not into hiking. She's not ever going to camp or car camp or anything like that. And that's fine. So when we go on trips, and I've got, the example of, we went to Colorado in 2020 when things kind of opened back up a little bit, at least. And I tried to make that trip both things, the personal side of it as well as the photography. And I readily admit I was letting those two sides conflict. Like we'd be just chilling in the Airbnb and I want to go out, but also I want to spend time with her and she wants to spend time with me. And I'd be getting a little crabby or whatever. And through the trip, I had to kind of like shut that photographer side of me off a little bit. And I still got some time in, but it's much harder when it's that type of quote unquote group outing versus a group of photographers. For me, even other photographers, it's a double-edged sword. Like I went to Colorado and my buddy John met up with me. Love hanging out with him. I consider him a good friend. But there's always, for me, and I know other photographers talk about this too, but even if you're both kind of doing your own thing, which we often did, like we would split and he'd go this way, I'd go that way, and then we would meet up wherever. And again, that's where the walkie-talkies came in handy. Check out our episode about gear.
Right.
But there's always in the back of my mind, like, is he waiting for me?
Right.
Or
Yep.
is he
Totally know that feeling.
mad because I'm not hanging with him from a photography standpoint? You know, we get together at camp and hang out or whatever.
Yeah.
You know, if weather conditions and location allow, build a fire, and that stuff's great. I love that.
Right.
And also, like, it helps combat the loneliness a little bit. Or if maybe I'm 5 days into the trip and I'm feeling a little lazy or whatever, gets you that motivation to get up out of bed or crawl out of the back of the 4Runner and get up for that sunrise or whatever. Although I didn't do a great job of letting John motivate me.
You're
in that
a tough
way
sunrise
in Colorado.
person.
I am. But so it's a weird dichotomy for me with other photographers because there can be a lot of inspiration and excitement and energy to be gained, and then just the fun of hanging with other people, especially in the downtime. Certainly,
I think you need to
learn
mix
from
it
other
in,
people.
right?
Like, oh, look at Jeffrey over there. He's composing that. I never even would have thought of that. So there's also a huge opportunity to learn from other people. But it's always that, like, I have trouble getting in the flow state.
Yep. It's
when
that
I'm with
back
other
of mind
people.
thing. You're
Right.
I don't think you're unique in that. I know the same feeling. You're out there and it's like, shoot, you and I went and photographed several times in the Smokies, independently. And we both know we love photography. We both know we could probably stay in the same spot for hours and hours. But I'm sure each of us in the back of our mind was like, do you think they want to move on? Do you think they'll care if I move on up here or go back? Or
and you
are
have
they,
no cell
should we go
signals.
home?
You can't even
Right.
check in. Yeah.
Right. So I think that lurk, which to your point can hit that flow state because you can't completely get into your zone because you have that lingering back thought. So yeah, I think it's interesting that even when you're going out with, and then if you take someone that's not, you and I are obviously way into our nature photography, there's lots of levels between non-photographer and us to how much time we'll spend doing this. And you get into that, it's like, man, it gets even more complicated. It's like, I know they like to take pictures, but do they like to take pictures at getting up at 4:30 in the morning and standing in the cold for an hour and a half before something happens?
Right.
But I think it's important, whichever way you fall to, obviously I know I have the preference towards solo. Sounds like you do too, because some of the extras. But I think you and I are both good examples. We do the group stuff, even if it's just one other photographer, or we've done meetups before in the past. I think it's important to push your comfort zone either way. If you're a person that likes groups, maybe try some time solo out there just to see how it feels, and vice versa. If you prefer the solo, go out with the group, because you're right. Those conversations around the camp at night, the early morning, the camaraderie, it is hard to beat that, even though there's that back of mind thing that can happen while you're actually photographing. But yeah,
it's almost more like a social event versus like a private project.
Yes.
Kind of thing.
Yeah.
Like, you're going to take a different mindset into both of those. So,
yep.
Anyway, yeah, I think it's something that a lot of photographers struggle with. Obviously, you can have some of the same issues shooting locally if you have a friend meet up with you or whatever. But when you're traveling, it's just, I think it is different, especially for me. Like, I've always got cell phone signal when I'm here locally. So even if my buddy John came over from the Dallas side and we were shooting at the local park, like, we could still keep in communication very easily. And that's another thing for me too. Like, you look at when I went out on that hike with Brent Clark in the Smokies, and he disappeared and he wasn't where he said he was going to. Then it's like, I'm worried about the other person. Like, something happened, and you get all that distraction. And so thanks, Brent, for distracting me from getting in a flow state. But no, there's a lot of factors that, again, go into it, but both positive and maybe a little bit of a negative as well. So has travel ever helped you reconnect with the why behind your photography? Again, we talked about, like, shooting locally. Hesitant to say, like, my local park gets stagnant, but especially when I'm going there a lot, like in the fall when I'm trying to get there multiple times a week, like by that third, fourth, fifth visit, I'm kind of like, do I really want to go back?
Yep.
So do you find that you get that kind of reconnection to the why you do it aspect when you travel somewhere?
I think so. And so much of it's we touched on earlier with when so much of my local photography is in short bursts of time. Even when I go to Hocking Hills, it's usually a few hours. I drive an hour down and I try to get out of there before the crowds pick up. It's not, even when I go there, it's not like I'm spending a full day out there. Whereas with the travel, which means you're always juggling, your mind's always getting compete. Oh, if I want to get back before rush hour, or I got to pick someone up from school or work, and all that stuff just is competing.
I got to get back and edit that podcast, or Michael's going to yell at me.
Right, exactly. The spreadsheet is not checked off yet. But then when you travel, because you can immerse yourself into it, I feel like it opens that hurdle, that barrier that you're out there and you're like, it's almost like, I remember why I do this. Like, it's for moments like this. And it can even be, the photo's not great. I can't count the number of times I've stood on some overlook, some rock, and the winds hit me in the face, and it could be blue skies or it could be crazy cold, and it's just like, this is fun. I'm enjoying this. This is a good time, and the camera's what got me out there. And to me, that's the reconnection of it. And I think it's harder to do that locally because you still have all these home responsibilities and daily life responsibilities that are harder to separate from, because you're going to be right back into that this afternoon or tonight.
Right.
Whereas if I'm hundreds of miles away from home, no, tonight's going to be, I'm camping out. I have no reason. I can't pay my bills, or I need, like, there's no chores to do because I'm not at home. Someone else is taking care of the pets, and it's very freeing. So yeah, I certainly feel that travel helps with that reconnection to the why of being a photographer.
Yeah, totally on board with that. I would say too, even maybe deeper or broader than that. That's kind of contradictory terms, but it's also, I got into photography to not show off in terms of like a egotistical or,
I was going to say that here comes the ego, folks. I'm looking forward to this one.
To show my family and my friends, like, look at these amazing places I'm going and the beautiful scenery I've got and that. And as we talked in one of the prior episodes, over time, I got away from showing those grander views and showing the place, and I was only showing the soul. And it was coming back from one of my Utah trips specifically. And I think it might have actually been, it was before my mom got sick, but I was showing her some of the photos, and she was, of course, mom's being mom. Oh, you're so beautiful, blah, blah, blah. But I'm looking at them with her, and I'm like, these, I like all of these, but they're not showing the place. They're showing the soul. So I'm not showing off in terms of the show and tell aspect, not in terms of the bragging aspect, but I'm not showing off the place. Like, look at the beautiful canyon walls around me, or, the view down the dry riverbed and storm clouds in the distance or whatever. So that spurred me to shift back. What was it? Year and a half, 2 years ago, in terms of making sure I am showing the broader, again, place, location, my surroundings, whatever that I'm immersed in. And then also using the smaller scenes to unveil its soul, so to speak, as I like to say. So I definitely think, again, I don't have that opportunity to do it here locally because just, again, flat landscape. Like, there's nothing, if I took a wider shot here, it would just be a wall of trees. So what am I really showing? But going to these new locations or different locations, especially locations that I know friends or family haven't been to, or maybe they're not even familiar with or haven't heard of, or they only know the iconic spots, but they don't know anything else about it. So yeah, all of that provides the opportunity to think back on why I'm doing this, and travel, and that not that it's travel photography, but photography that comes about through my travel helps reinforce that original why of why did I start doing it. And then of course I fell in love with it from a creativity and artistic standpoint, but there's that underlying why of I'm doing it for others too, to show other people, whether they're family, friends, complete strangers, the beauty of this world we live in, especially in times like this when it's hard to recognize a lot of beauty in the world we live in. So, so once again, we're coming up on an hour here. I've got a few more topics here I've got tagged. Did you have anything else that you wanted to touch on, or shall I just continue to roll?
I think you're good to continue. I think it's going pretty good. I have complete faith in your question choices.
You're putting a lot of faith on me today. So I think we can kind of roll the next two topics and maybe one discussion, but what's the value, or probably more likely, what's the drawback to working under pressure? And that's as it relates to, I've only got 5 days here, or I've got 5 days here and the weather's going to be bad for 3 days of it. So there's, again, value or drawback there. And then going into the planning aspect that we've talked about, and maybe we don't need to delve on this much because we have talked about it in the past, but when you are going on a bigger trip, do you approach it any differently in terms of that planning, or like me, I have said countless times, like I go somewhere and it's very spontaneous. I have a region in mind, but then I just kind of go and wander and see. Very similar approach when I'm shooting locally. Do you take a more tighter planning approach when you're going someplace new or someplace that you don't get to very often? So kind of like that double whammy of the pressures of the time. And maybe this is the only time I'm going to get there versus maybe that then leads you to over planning or building up too many expectations or ideas of what you've got to encounter versus what you're actually going to encounter.
So I think it's interesting to pair those two together. First, I was like, man, this is going to be a giant question. But as I think about it and think even about my response, I think they do tie in together quite well. Because I think one of the downsides of travel is if you feel that pressure of, you said it at the beginning, I got 5 days. And if you're in someplace big, we'll throw Death Valley as the example. That place is huge. I mean, you can be driving 45 minutes from one location to the other. And then we've already talked, we'll spend hours at a place. It's real easy for that schedule that could seem like you've got a ton of time to become, if I don't get this now, I'm not going to get it. And if you let that negatively impact you, that can ruin a trip. Because if you're like, I'm going to go hit this overlook at this day at this time, and you get blue skies and can't figure out how to make something interesting of it, if you let that impact you, that could ruin the rest of the trip. Or now you're like, do I skip something and do I come back or do I just run with it and go? So I think that's the drawback of the working under pressure on a trip, because you're feeling like, I need to get this photo now. Even my trips, you've been to Lost Dutchman State Park, and I've been able to spend multiple days, several days there. But again, there's still a finite number of days. I'm there for 3 days, and I can go visit all 3 days. So it's not that if I miss it tonight, I won't get it. But what if something doesn't happen in that 3 days that I was sort of looking for? Again, that pressure is just terrible. So I think it's key to not embrace travel, be flexible, and go from there. Now, to tie into the planning part, I would say I do plan more when I travel than I do any of my local stuff, because local stuff, I sort of know where it's at. I can just sort of go, and I might have a destination in mind locally, but there's very little pressure. Worst case is, no, doesn't work this time. I can go back tomorrow or next week or 2 weeks or whenever the time permits. With that said, back to the whole drawback thing. In my planning, it's more, I just make a list of places I could go see. It's not a have to go see. It's not I might even make notes of this place is probably better in the afternoon, evening than a morning or not. But it's not that I'm putting a date and time on it. It's when I see what the conditions are and I gauge where I'm at in this trip, and I'm trying to decide, well, where do I want to go tomorrow morning? If I've had a pretty successful trip, then I've probably got some options. Or maybe I slot something else in differently, and I do use I could go over there. I've made a note that that's good for the morning, and tomorrow morning looks good. I should go there. So I plan a bit to get the most out of the trip, because I don't like to have to be researching how do I get somewhere or what is here while I'm on the trip. But my caution goes back to that earlier point of, don't become a slave to that schedule, because it's not a schedule for me. It's more of a list of spots. It might be a list of pins on my map, and it not a set date and time. So I think that's a neat pairing of questions planning versus the pressure.
Oh, thanks. I'm a good little
look
host.
at that. That was pretty good. I was nervous. I'm like, man, that's a big question. But no. So how's your approach? Because I mean, you're Mr. Spreadsheet guy. We know you've got lots of spreadsheets. So where's your mix when you're doing these trips and travel?
So running the business, very different versus my going out in the field approach. And I think I've talked about this before. Like, I'm not going into a new location, especially totally blind. I'm doing either research online or talking to people I know that have been there multiple times. In case of Southern Utah, I've got a fantastic photography guidebook. Bought, I think it's from the same guy, one for Colorado this past year. So I do have that idea both ahead of time, but I'll also do it when I'm there. On the flip side, I historically, maybe not as much now, but historically, I've probably been a little too reliant upon spontaneity when I'm going to these locations. And great example, my first trip to Southern Utah in 2022, when my buddy John came with me, I had no plan going into that. I didn't even have the guidebook. He fortunately had that guidebook already. And I will readily admit, like, I wasn't prepared like I should have been going to that one. It was like, we didn't have signal. So we would have had to drive into towns to do any kind of basic like scouting through looking online or whatever. So
Right.
that was a lesson learned from me that like, oh, and also thinking back, that was my first big quote unquote solo trip. So it was a huge lesson learned in terms of every time I'd gone on a photography trip before, it was to attend a workshop. And
Right.
other people did the planning.
Yep.
And then suddenly I was going on this trip, not by myself because John was there, but it was my trip. And like, he's like, hey man, this is your trip. So you decide where we're going to go in that. I'm like, oh shit. Like, I don't know.
Yep.
So if he hadn't had that book, like it would have been pretty bad.
Right.
Thank you, John, for having that book, which I then kept for like a year before I got it back to you. So there is certainly lessons I've learned over the course of going on these trips, and like, especially going on my very first trip truly by myself and knowing, okay, looking back on that Utah experience, I now know that I need to be better prepared, but I still want that spontaneity approach.
Yep.
And now that I've gotten more familiar with, it's only been 2 summer trips, but the last 2 summers I've gone to Colorado. And again, we've talked about the times I've gone to Southern Utah multiple times. I do go in with a more structured plan, but it's still very much regional. And now I've got enough of a baseline understanding that like when I go to Utah, I'm going to go to X location first because I know it's solitude and quiet and beautiful and there's plenty of dispersed camping. Pretty much always going to start there. But then what I'm going to do day 2, I don't know, maybe I'll go
more up in the air.
Highway 12. You know, I'm figuring it out as I go. And I think that lets me have this spontaneity and I'm just going to see what I see and let curiosity be my guide mindset. It lets me have all that. But again, like at this point, I've got that baseline knowledge. So you have to think about that as well. Is this someplace I've never been? Then yeah, I probably need to do some more planning, have some specific locations, maybe not to the point of, oh, here's the specific photos I want to take or the compositions I want to take. But again, here's maybe not just a region, but a canyon I want to visit or whatever, and be a little bit more targeted and thoughtful in that approach. But it is something I struggle with because I do like going to Utah or Colorado or whatever. I have no idea from day to day usually where I'm going to go. Right. I may not make that decision until I go to bed the night before. I may not know even until I wake up in the morning and it's like, okay, well, what do I feel like? I feel like looking for an alpine meadow or, basin or whatever, or seeking out a canyon. So I'm going to go over here in Utah. So I agree with everything you said, but also I've had some lessons learned there too, as I've gotten more into the independent nature of photography trips that I would say let me be a good example of maybe don't be quite so loosey-goosey that I like to promote all the time when you're going someplace new. There's also a safety factor there. You don't want to get yourself in over your head or anything like that too. So, So a couple things to wrap up with here. So first of all, what advice would you give somebody preparing for their first photo-centric trip? And obviously I just gave some in terms of the amount of planning that maybe you do a little bit more than what you typically do. I've got another one I have in mind that I'll talk to after you share your thoughts. But then beyond what's the one piece of advice you would give somebody going on their first photo-centric trip? Beyond that, do you think it's better to then revisit those places or continue to seek out new places and see as much as you can over the course of a year or two or lifetime, whatever? Right.
So let's see. So advice, let's start with that one first.
One piece of advice you would give.
One piece of advice. So because we've already talked about sort of where we fall on the planning piece, I'm going to just sort of say that's the unsaid. There's a little bit of planning is probably good. Stay flexible. I would encourage more planning on sort of the gear you take aspect of things, I think. Because you got to tailor it. I mean, I have my standard load when we've done a whole episode on photography gear, so I don't want to belabor it, but do think about the gear you're taking and make sure you're setting yourself up for success on that standpoint. And that could be if you have a spare piece of gear, you might not take that locally. because you're close to home, you can do it again. But if you're traveling a long way, that might be the time to bring that second camera body just in case something happens to the first, or a little bit of overlap in the lenses, while balancing if you're doing a lot of hiking, not carrying a ton of stuff. But
or you're flying and you're limited on check on or carry on. Or
exactly.
Whatever. Yeah, there's a lot that goes into it.
Yes, but that level of planning, it lets you focus on the photography when you get there. Same, how are you taking care of your food? You know, don't find yourself someplace with no food when you could have brought a couple snacks to tide you over until it got to be midday when you could go find.
Give me a bag of powdered donuts, man, and I am set.
Right. He's set. So don't forget your powdered donuts. But that's probably some of my advice. My packing lists, my trip prep lists are fairly extensive. That's probably where I'm much more like that.
You know, it sounds like an app would be helpful.
An app would be super helpful to make sure you don't forget that stuff, because I do think that's important, and it's just one of those things where the over planning there lets you be flexible out in the field. So that's probably my thing on a photo-centric advice beyond just the right amount of planning your locations. So moving beyond that and into the revisit favorite places or chase new ones, my approach is a mix. I like to revisit places because I do value some familiarity with things, but I try to expand in a place where I'll go. West Virginia, that's a place I go to all the time. I try to find a new area, a new spot to sort of explore or spend more time at that I haven't in the past. There used to be, I've visited the waterfall now, but there used to be this waterfall in somewhat of an obscure place that never really made it in my first couple trips out there. But so now when I go out, I'll try to find something a little extra to explore a little more. So I revisit some of my places, my old favorites, and see those, but I try to add something in. Some are Death Valley. Anytime I go out there, I hit my regular spots. Like, yep, I go here, I go there, I go there. But I try to find some new canyon, some new hike I haven't done. And maybe it's a big mainstream one that I just haven't happened to do. So I probably tend to revisit regions, but explore new places within the region. I don't think my way is the right way per se. I think some people might be better. So you're more energized by something new every single time. But my approach is I probably revisit regions more with adding new places within the region is my approach for that. But I don't consider that prescriptive. I don't know if that works for everybody.
Yeah. No, and I would say my approach is, I've already alluded to it, going back to southern Utah as much as I have, but then, I'm going to the same general region, but now I want to explore this canyon that I haven't been into before, or walk along this river that I haven't explored along before, or what have you. So there's that mix. I tend to like to go back to locations over and over, because although I do feel like I'm, maybe unique's not the right word, but I'm able to go into a new location sight unseen and usually find that inspiration and be able to come away with some work I'm really happy with. Sometimes I probably come away with some of my better work because I'm not going in with any preconceived notions, and therefore I am having to be totally open. And again, that I wonder mindset and curiosity and everything. But I do try to, like you said, sprinkle in new specific spots within a region. I'm at a point, and I know I'm speaking also, like there's a privilege in how much you get to travel each year or how frequently or whatever.
Yep.
I'm trying to get to a new location each year at this point. So for me this year, it was the Smokies. I think we talked in episode 1, like I had been to the Smokies since I was a little kid. So totally new to me. Nothing looked familiar, and certainly not from a photography standpoint. One of the workshops we're talking about for 2026 is Death Valley. I have been a photographer there, but it was all night focused. So I haven't even really seen the landscape in sunlight, so to speak. So in that regard, I know there's opportunity. I see plenty of work from there that's inspiring and beautiful and everything. So I'm already trying to frame my mind. Like, hey, you gotta be open, and I wonder, and curiosity and all that good stuff. But depending on the location, I have varying degrees of excitement for going somewhere totally new versus revisiting and expanding what I know of a location I've been to once before, or multiple times before, what have you. As far as the advice I would give, for me, it kind of goes back to the whole prep / expectations piece, and the advice being just relax.
Yep.
And this also kind of ties into the conversation we had with Barb about the workshops is if you've got the flexibility, if you have the quote unquote privilege, like maybe if you think you need 4 days somewhere, maybe give yourself a 5th day or expand it out to 6 days. Let yourself get into the area and just take some time to relax. Unwind from the travel. If it's flight and it was crazy and hectic, the last thing you want to do, just like a workshop, is go in someplace already stressed out or feeling exhausted or what have you. That's not going to be very conducive to being successful from a photography standpoint. So I would just say relax. Whether it's you're not getting the conditions that you hoped for or expected, don't build up those expectations to begin with. But also, if you've got the possibility, don't try to cram it into as short of a window as you can. And again, I know
that's good advice.
The first inclination is somebody typing on their keyboard, like, well, it must be nice to be able to have that flexibility. And I've only got so many vacations. Trust me, I know. I was in that same boat in the corporate world for 27 years. You got to kind of pick your battles. But if you've got any kind of flexibility or say in the matter, maybe add on that extra day, especially on the front end, just to let yourself unwind a little bit before you go out and try to be creative and all that stuff. So that would be,
I think that's good.
My number one is relax.
Yep.
All right. Good. Anything else, Mr.
No, I think that's
Tadlock?
it. I think that was a good show.
Yeah. We'll see.
Yeah.
What do you think, dear viewer?
Yeah.
Go and review us.
Yes. 5 stars.
I brought it all around, full circle. Become a Patreon supporter. Become a free member if that's all you're interested in. But, you know.
Participate in the conversations. We've had some good conversations over on Patreon.
Podcast host, we have to pay the bills too.
Sob story.
I say with big watery eyes. But anyways, join the conversation over on Patreon, whether you're free or paid. Love to have you there. It's been a little quieter lately. I think since school picked up, people haven't been quite as active. And also we're getting into fall season, so people are doing some travel in that again. But we've still had some really good conversations there. So please join us over on Patreon. Please leave us a review, 5 stars. Let us know how we're doing. Leave a comment there as well. And unless Jeffrey's got anything else, let's see if I can get this outro. I don't know why I'm having so much trouble with my own stinking outro of late.
Yeah. I'm going to shut her down.
Listen to it again in my edits, and I'm like, my God, I'm screwing up my outros left and right. Thanks for listening. Thanks for watching. And until next time, take care. Yay, I got it.
Did it. Awesome.